Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. It's good to be with you. Thanks for joining us. 20 days after Election Day and more than 2 weeks after the race was projected for President-elect Joe Biden, the Trump administration is allowing the official transition process to begin. Trump appointee Emily Murphy allowed the process to move forward Monday evening after Michigan certified its vote. Murphy is the head of the agency responsible for freeing up government transition funds. On the heels of the news Tuesday, the Dow Jones Industrial Average crossed the 30,000 mark for the first time in the index's history. The market pushed higher this afternoon after Pennsylvania certified President-elect Biden's win in the state, finishing up 1.5% for a record-high close. President Trump spoke to reporters briefly earlier, appearing to take credit for the milestone as his legal team continues fighting the election results.
The stock market's just broken 30,000. Never been broken, that number. That's a sacred number, 30,000. Nobody thought they'd ever see it. That's the 9th time since the beginning of 2020. And it's the 48th time that we've broken records during the Trump administration. And I just want to congratulate all the people within the administration that work so hard. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the people of our country, because there are no people like you.
Despite resistance from the outgoing administration, President-elect Biden is moving forward with building out his government. He publicly announced his top foreign policy and national security appointees. Mr. Biden used the speech to lay out how he wants to govern, in contrast to President Trump.
And will ensure that our service members, diplomats, and intelligence professionals can do their job free of politics. They'll not only repair, they'll also reimagine American foreign policy and national security for the next generation. And they'll tell me what I need to know, not what I want to know. To the United States Senate, I hope these outstanding nominees received a prompt hearing and that we can work across the aisle in good faith to move forward for the country.
Nikole Killion, Caitlin Huey-Burns, and Zeke Miller join me now. Nikole is a CBS News correspondent with the president-elect in Delaware. Caitlin is CBSN's political reporter with us from New York. And Zeke is a CBSN political contributor and White House reporter for the Associated Press. Welcome. It's great to see you all. Nikole, what are the common threads tying President-elect Biden's nominees together?
Well, part of the common thread is the president-elect himself. Many of these officials have worked with the president-elect. Another common thread is that they all have a lot of experience. Most, if not all of these, are veterans of the Obama administration. And as I mentioned, they have close personal ties with the president-elect. For instance, people like Tony Blinken, who has been working with the president-elect now for some 15 years plus, a career diplomat, someone who last served as Deputy Secretary of State. You also have people like Jake Sullivan, who was the then Vice President and National Security Advisor. And then another common thread, of course, is just the historic nature of all of these picks, whether it is someone like Alejandro Mayorkas, who, if confirmed, would become the first Latino, the first immigrant to be Secretary of Homeland Security, or Avril Haines, who, for instance, would be the first woman to lead the intelligence community. And then the final common thread here is just this dedication to bring American diplomacy back. That's what we heard the president-elect say at the very top of his remarks. America is back. We also heard from his pick for the UN ambassador, Linda Thomas Greenfield, who said not only is America back, but multilateralism is back, diplomacy is back. So really, that is the common thread. We also heard from former Secretary of State John Kerry, who will now serve as a special climate envoy, who also talked about trying to get back to some of the agreements that were forged during the Obama administration, like getting back into the Paris Climate Accord. That is something that former Secretary Kerry mentioned in his remarks today, and even perhaps go beyond that. So many common threads, whether it's experience, whether it's diplomacy, or, as I mentioned, that personal connection to the president-elect.
Well, Caitlin, we heard the president-elect just a moment ago also talking about reaching across the aisle to work with Republicans, quote, in good faith. Now, of course, he may be ready to work with Republicans, but Caitlin, is that feeling mutual?
Not really at this moment, considering that Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, has yet to acknowledge Biden's victory in the election, even after some Republicans are starting to slowly but surely come around to the idea that Biden actually won. We've heard from people like Senator Rob Portman, Senator Pat Toomey, Senator Lamar Alexander, having urged the president to move on with the transition, but we haven't heard that from McConnell and others in top leadership. So for Biden, he's really entering what can be a very difficult territory for him. He is used to a Washington that is just not the same as it was when he was there. It's kind of like when you move away and then come back and all of your friends are gone, or you don't really recognize the people that are there. That's kind of what's going to happen to Joe Biden when he takes the helm in January. When he's talking about some of these nominees that he is putting forth, he's been really emphasizing their ability to get through a Senate confirmation battle. That's a top concern, really, for members of Biden's team to really be able to get their nominees through. When you think about how these others have been confirmed, he highlighted people like DHS Secretary Mayorkas having been confirmed multiple times by the Senate, but that was in a very different environment. Janet Yellen, for example, was confirmed in 2014 with Republican support, but just 3 of those Republican senators who supported her are still left in Washington. So certainly a big battle's ahead, and there is this acknowledgement from the Biden team when they talk about these confirmation battles that they kind of know this territory that they're walking into, but also why they and Republicans on the other side are putting such an emphasis on these 2 runoff races in Georgia. And when you listen to the Republicans' messaging in Georgia, they're treating those races like the last stand against a Biden administration. So that kind of tells you everything you need to know about how they anticipate not really perhaps working with Biden.
Yeah, Washington is a vastly different place than just a few years ago. Well, Zeke, I want to play a clip from Mr. Biden's pick for the new position of Special Climate Envoy, former Secretary of State John Kerry. Here he is talking about his role. Let's listen.
To end this crisis, the whole world must come together. You're right to rejoin Paris on day 1, and you're right to recognize that Paris alone is not enough. At the global meeting in Glasgow 1 year from now, all nations must raise ambition together, or we will all fail together. And failure is not an option.
I mean, Zeke, how big of a change is this from the climate policy of the Trump administration these last 4 years?
It's basically night and day. 4 years ago when President Trump, or then candidate Trump, was running for office, he was pledging to get out of the Paris Climate Accord, and he did that. The U.S. left the agreement just last month, really, just before the election. That's when it formally kicked in. We saw the Trump administration roll back a slew of Obama, Biden administration environmental regulations, Clean Power Rule, Clean Water Rule, all sorts of regulations along those lines that the Biden administration, incoming Biden administration, is pledging to put back into force. Obviously, a lot of this will, the place. What's really interesting about elevating former Secretary of State John Kerry to this role is that, really given the outcome of the November election with this divided Washington, where Democrats saw their margins narrow in the House and are still fighting for control of the Senate, that any progress on climate is likely going to have to be made by executive action or through multilateral action. And so elevating John Kerry to that position is sort of a tacit acknowledgement on the part of the president-elect that getting some sort of big substantive legislation, as he had maybe promised during the campaign, that's probably not going to happen in this Congress in this moment.
Yeah. Let's talk about the near term. Nikole, now that the transition has officially begun, what actually changes here for the Biden-Harris team?
Well, I do want to point out that a short time ago, the president-elect did address reporters as he left a venue here in town, a theater where he's been doing a lot of his events. But he did tell reporters that he has not yet gotten intelligence briefings. Of course, we just learned late this evening that President Trump has now officially signed off on him being able to get those presidential daily briefs. So again, the president-elect saying that he has not yet started getting those. He also said that he would be willing to meet with President Trump. And we know a key part of some of these changes with ascertainment is that all of the transition officials get to speak with members of the current administration. Of course, this would be on the highest of levels if it were to happen, but certainly the president-elect expressing an interest in speaking to the current president despite this stalemate that we have been witnessing over the past couple of weeks. Some other notable changes as far as ascertainment is concerned. We do know from transition officials that they have now made contact with all of the federal agencies, and so really a key priority continues to be the pandemic. We already know, according to Secretary Azar, but also from transition officials, that they will make the pandemic response key in their initial contacts with these agencies, and have already worked on trying to start scheduling some meetings and briefings on that front. So certainly the process well underway and will continue in force at this point.
Really interesting to hear. Zeke, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what do you think the chances are of a meeting between the president-elect and the president?
I think we're all trying to gauge that here. Certainly not likely before December 14th, which is when the Electoral College meets and formalizes Joe Biden's victory. But after that, really, it's sort of all bets are off. It really comes down to what does President Trump want his legacy to be? How does he want to leave office? Mm-hmm. And a lot of the questions about, will he show up to the inauguration? What will the level of engagement will he personally have with his successor be? That's the big unanswered question in Washington right now.
So in the meantime, Zeke, we mentioned off the top that the president has not actually conceded, and his legal team continues efforts to overturn the election. But what options do they actually have left as states continue to certify their results?
They're out of options. There are some states that have not certified their results. They'll take the next week or two to get there before the December 8th deadline for states to certify their electors. But the states that are outstanding are states that are reliably Democratic, that Joe Biden won handily. The battleground states, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, those are done. Pennsylvania, done. There's no way at this point for the Trump campaign or the Trump legal team to overturn that. This is an effort on their part. They're fighting a political battle, a public relations battle on the part of the president. This isn't substantive. This isn't about the election anymore. This is about the president's future and his attempts to sort of sow doubt and undermine confidence in the outcome, so the president can say, "Oh, I didn't lose. It was stolen from me." There's no evidence of that. He lost, but he would like to maintain that and keep his supporters engaged that way, and that's what we're seeing from his legal team going forward.
So speaking of undermining confidence, Caitlin, what impact is this refusal to concede from President Trump having on the Republican Party's faith in the election process?
Well, it threatens to pose some serious challenges in a place that they're really going to need Republicans to show up, and that's in those runoff races in January in Georgia. The fate or the balance of power in the U.S. Senate now hinges upon those two Senate seats where Republicans were forced into a runoff and are defending those two seats. So raising doubts about the election, especially in a place like especially in a place like Georgia, where the president has disparaged the Republican Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, repeatedly and has tried to raise doubt about those results there, even though they have been certified, really raises questions about whether that has an impact on their own voters, whether they are leaving votes on the table in a critical race. We heard from Donald Trump Jr. tweeting out this week, encouraging people to vote. He said that he was hearing rumors that people might boycott those races in Georgia, and he was saying, no, you need to show up. So that kind of shows you how much of an impact, even just the messaging, even if the Trump team has been unsuccessful in trying to overturn results, especially since they don't have any evidence of any wrongdoing or fraud. The messaging alone could kind of pose a threat to their own chances in that way. And so that's what we're watching, especially in Georgia, is what the Republicans do when they're campaigning down there. Are they encouraging people to vote early? Are they encouraging people to make sure they get in their vote in time to be counted? Those are some things to watch, especially in light of the president's rhetoric.
Right, and if the president himself decides to go down to Georgia to campaign, what will his message be there, given everything that you just spelled out? All right, Nikole Killion, Caitlin Huey-Burns, and Zeke Miller, always great to have you all. Thank you very much.